Hi everyone. Wanted to give a little bit of intercoder reliability training regarding our coding for our project here. We kind of need to get really moving now. We're coming up on our deadline here in just about 2 months, so we kind of really have maybe a couple weeks to finish up the coding, and then maybe 2 weeks to interpret the results, and then kind of 2 weeks to write the paper, and maybe 2 weeks extra leeway, if that, to kind of write it and pull everything together. So hopefully this coding training will help us as we're moving forward here through this. Uh, First, just a bit of background on the overall categories. So main sources used, right? We have like government officials, politicians, businesses, utilities. That includes the Waukesha Water Utility, which is mentioned quite a bit. Health organizations, environmental organizations, which includes the Department of Natural Resources, as well as other non-governmental environmental orgs. Special interest groups. So those are, coalitions of people. Those also could be environmental groups. So you might be coding both of those at times. Citizens, of course, pretty self-explanatory. Content frames then, government frames, so talking about the governmental process, the application process. I think there was a couple editorials in here, opinion pieces talking about candidates and where they stand, so that would be a government frame. The economic frame is talked about a few times in here regarding taxes or costs of the implementation or growth, economic, how the water can like support economic growth. Public health, pretty self-explanatory, but that also includes, consumers. So thinking about, is there enough water for people? The environment, public accountability. So public accountability is going to be a lot with those opinion pieces because they're calling on the public, they're trying to inform the public, maybe get the citizens to do something. Also, some of the meetings, like these the open meetings that are talked about for the public, those might be public accountability. Now, episodic and thematic frames. So episodic frames are usually like coverage of one single event. So I think in here I saw it mostly when it was about a meeting. So it was like a meeting took place at this and this time, this happened, this person said this official said this, and that was how things summed up. So they're kind of like tight little episodes that are kind of like if you think of an episode in like a TV series, it's just one snippet of the action that's going along. Now, thematic is different because it's trying to provide more background information about the issue. So maybe there's a meeting going on, but the journalist chooses to pull in a lot of background information and to talk about a lot of different sources and different viewpoints and things like that. So it's going to be more elaborate, maybe go into more detail. I think one example that was kind of interesting, there was kind of an episodic story that I read in here. It was about a meeting that took place, but then just to the right of it, there was like a timeline, what's called a by the numbers, and it was about all the different uh, how many gallons of water would be used and things like that. And so that like really went beyond just the meeting and provided a lot more background information. So I coded that then as thematic frame. All right. So then lastly, we have societal impact frame or human interest frame. So that societal impact is going to be the majority of these. So this is, all of these stories talking about what is the impact going to be on the Great Lakes and thus, on society through that, or citizens needing water. So that's the majority of them. Human interest is more close-up looks at, I think a couple that I saw in here was some candidates. So interesting pieces about who is this candidate and where do they stand on the environment and on this issue. So more about a person or interesting people dealing with the issue. Another example that I saw in here of an article, there was one about a classroom where a teacher assigned the class to look at this water problem and try to come up with solutions. And I think they made some advertisements for it. So that's a human interest story. It's about how are humans, it's more about the people rather kind of than the issue. So hopefully that's a bit of some good explanation of these different categories. And I'm going to go through here now and just go through like the first article for sure, and maybe follow along kind of with my thinking of how I'm dealing with this, and maybe it can help provide you some maybe some guidance. So let's see here. So the very first article, it's a continuation from page 1, and so page 1 is usually news, and this looks like a news page. And as we read through it, sure enough, we find it is a news article. Starts out with a quote from this Hobbes, and he talks about, he has a quote, "The limited exception for communities bordering the Great Lakes is to meet the current and critical needs of communities with no other drinking water options." Okay, so that's public health. Not, he says, not to support extensive future economic growth outside the basin. So he's kind of saying, hey, this is about supposed to be how to for public health, water supply, not about economic growth to have water to grow the city and whatnot. So I'm seeing economic and public health here. Uh, Next, General Manager of the Waukesha Water Utility, Dan Dukniak, is quoted. So that's that water utility source. He talks about the court mandate for the deadline, the diversion of how many gallons. There's a mention of Water Use Section Chief Eric Ebersberger, so that sounds like a government official. Let's see. Dukniak talks about the legal challenges and wraps up. It says Hobbes's resolution had the support of 11 other legislators. So Hobbes sounds like he is a politician, and it talks about other legislators. So if we go now to the coding, so we'll code it the news article. There were government sources. There was the utility manager source, Dukniak. Um, didn't talk about, or there wasn't any health organizations or environmental groups, no special interests, no citizens. For frames, it was a government frame. It was kind of about the process. Economics was an important part. Public health was here. The environment wasn't brought up, nor public accountability. It did code this as a thematic frame because there are these different, content frames included. So it is kind of more than one. It's not just like there was a meeting and this was, covered and it was just a government frame. But these other issues kind of were involved and at play here. Societal impact. They are talking about the impact of this on consumers and society. All right, so that's the first one, how I would code that one. So sorry about that. So let's go ahead and look at the second one now. This says 4 conditions for the Waukesha water bailout. All right, this is on the editorial page. So and it says this is a guest opinion, so we know that. Let's see, and this one came up in a couple of different papers too. So after I coded this one, it was easy to just copy and paste and put this for the other papers as well. So let's see. Should Lake Michigan water be sent outside the watershed to Waukesha, and if so, what should be expected back? So let's consider, for now, the bailout should be rejected. All right, so he's saying it should be rejected. Talks about the Ice Age and about plants and animals and intercontinental web of the ecosystems. Okay, so we're definitely talking about the environment here. Let's see, and the Great Lakes Compact is supposed to sustain it, he says. The aquifer is getting sucked dry, so he says we're running out of water. And then he has some points regarding why it should be rejected. Let's see, he mentions the DNR, what they've allowed. Uh, Talks about some penalties that could happen. Um, More risks for phosphorus, algae blooms. Talks about it as the spring city. Okay, and at the bottom, so it's pretty much an environmental frame here, pretty straightforward. He is a county supervisor. All right, so we know now he is a politician. So we can go now to the spreadsheet for 2 here. So we'll code 2, it's an opinion article. This person is a government person. No businesses mentioned, no health organizations. The DNR was mentioned, so that's environmental org for a source. And no special interests or citizens. So the frame here, there was a government frame, I think. This was largely about, the compact and why it should be rejected, or the application and why it should be rejected. That kind of framed the whole thing. And then another frame was definitely the environment brought up. I think also public health was a part of this as well, because he talked about the water supply and for citizens. And then let's see, environment, of course, and then public accountability. This was on the opinions page, and he's kind of making a call to the public here about this. So I would say yes, it's a public accountability frame. If they're on the opinion page, there's a good chance that they're probably going to be this public accountability frame. This was thematic because they covered a lot of different things through those different bullet points. And societal impact as well at the end. So it was kind of talking more about society and those types of things. I also, if we, I think maybe there's a good case could be made that there's a bit of an economic frame in here that about the savings would be too slow. There would be cost penalties, things like that. So I think he does bring in an economic frame here too. So sorry, I skipped over that one. All right, so this is again another good example of how there's a thematic frame because there's a lot of different frames in that. All right, so let's move on to the third one while we're kind of on a roll here. All right. So this is, this is the exact same one again. So this is the same one, so that's pretty easy. Copy and paste there, right? Okay. So just copy and paste, make sure everything lines up well. All right, so that's 3. So let's go on to the 4th one then. See, unless this is the same again, but we'll see. Okay, here's okay, this is at the top of the page in the upper right hand corner, wet between the ears. This is that article about the high school class where the teacher is talking about Waukesha's future with water. So as you read through the beginning here, they're talking about the water, how the Waukesha's water utility conservation program and how they're trying to help promote those conservation programs. So how the assignment was created by the teacher and how the students were dealing with it. They talk about the water utility is mentioned, let's see, kind of toward the end is when they really start to get into a few details. There's a source, Waukesha Water Utility Technical Services Manager, Kelly Zalistra, said conservation and efficient use of water is especially important. So conservation's here in the environment they're talking about. This is a science class. They're talking about radium levels and things like that. Let's see, they talk about the Great Lakes Compact just at the very end as kind of a way to wrap it up. And finally about how the students are working with the project. So as we go to code this here, it is a news article. Let's see, there weren't any government sources mentioned, but there was that utility person, so there will be the business utility source. And the citizens, those were sources in there. So the teacher, she's just a typical citizen. So we'll code one for there for citizen. Now content frames, really this was just about the environment, really none of these other ones. So the environment would be the only one here. Um, Now, this is kind of an episodic glimpse into this classroom. It's kind of a all-in-one wrapped up story here. It's like, here's what's happening in this classroom, something kind of interesting uh, and that's happening. So this would be the episodic frame. And then it would be the human interest, because again, this is a group of students and the teacher, and kind of like, oh, this is kind of an interesting thing, and what's some interesting, information about this project that they're working on. All right. Okay, and so now let's go on to 5. All right, so this is another continuation story at the very end here. It says water, the Lake Michigan diversion option. Let's see, the approval by the governors, the deadline, the letter of intent, Milwaukee officials, their involvement, Barrett, who's the mayor of Milwaukee, talks about the compact. Dukniak said the DNR doesn't agree, so we've got the DNR source. So it looks like this is pretty much a straightforward political article here. So for that one, go ahead. It's a news article. Government sources were included, like Mayor Barrett. No business or utility, no health orgs. The environmental org for the DNR was there. Special interest was there. Government frame, yep, because it was really kind of all just about the process. And then this is an episodic frame for sure, because it's just kind of here's this official stance, here's this official stance, they're disagreeing, here we are in the process. And then it's a societal impact kind of outlook on there, not human interest, like close up of any of the politicians or like the previous article we just looked at. All right, so hopefully that provides some good information for you guys, kind of with coding these first few. There's room for debate on some of these things, but if you could go ahead and if we could take another stab at this coding for these 30, so that we can kind of move forward here. And then if we have any, or if you find any big issues or changes that you think need to be made, let me know, and we can talk about those. But hopefully this, kind of gives you a good idea of kind of how we orient ourselves toward these different frames. It's when we're doing excuse me, the manual holistic coding, which is what we're doing, right? We're not doing the computer, right, operated coding. It is advantageous for us because framing theory is how we frame our minds to perceive an issue, or how politicians shape an issue for us to think about it in a certain way, or these different stakeholders try to shape the issue for us to think about it in a certain way. And journalists play a role in that because they're attending these meetings, they're interviewing these people, and sometimes journalists adopt that frame from the politicians or from the utility folks or DNR, or sometimes they're much more very objective, which is what we really hope. But these different kind of frames purported by these strategic communicators, we can now look, in here and see kind of what are they saying is the most important reason we should be thinking about this. So that's why, coding the framing can be a bit tougher, because it's kind of not just was this word mentioned or was this word mentioned, but is this kind of talking about more economics, or is this talking more about the environment? So I think this will really help us to, make a strong kind of mixed methods type of project where we can say, hey, we have the statistics, but we also read through it ourselves, and through this intercoder reliability and this manual, tedious manual, holistic approach, we made sure that we were really, seeing these frames, that it wasn't just, checking for words like a computer program might do. So I think that will really help strengthen the paper. Also, because we are doing an entire population of the state, right? We can use some nice simpler statistics for those, and show that, hey, we've got the anytime Great Lakes Compact was used in any story, we covered it, and we should have the whole population of these articles from the state with these sources. So I think that really helps the project. So if we see duplicates of these articles and things like that, that's just fine, because they appeared multiple times, or in different issues, or even I think like the Freeman had a few multiple where it was even like the same page ones, but I think that's because they had some special releases of it, because it was important. So I think it's fine if we code those, because we're trying to grab that entire population. So I think again that will really help strengthen the study. So. All right, guys. Well, let me know if you have any questions. Also, let's talk about when is a good time to meet. If Wednesdays is still good, I'm pretty free Wednesday afternoons. So that from kind of noon to 5, I'm pretty open. So if you want to let me know when a good time to meet might be, and I'm going to go ahead and keep moving forward with some uh, coding, finding out some coding that we should do. Well, that's probably our next step, is we need to figure out to divide up what we want, who wants to code what. I'm not sure if we had done that. So maybe hopefully we can meet this week, or and kind of see what we got here, or talk about next steps, or even through email or whatnot, divide up what we want to do. So, all right. Well, thanks, folks. Let me know if you have any questions. Look at what I coded, and kind of see if there are any major differences, and so that we can make sure that we're on the same track and we can get that reliability statistic. All right. Okay. Thanks, guys. Bye.